MIDI protocol has been around for nearly 40 years now. Fantastic piece of engineering. It basically involves computers and sound modules to communicate with just a few little packets of data. So MIDI files are very, very small. What I'm going to show you is how to sort of deal with the ever-increasing complexity of MIDI and to make a MIDI file that will open up on somebody else's computer. Let's take a look. Here then on my computer you can see all my MIDI data in green boxes there. I've got piano, drums and bass, and I've basically made up a load of loops for blues musicians. Just piano, bass and drums, so you can jam along in any key at any tempo. It's the beauty of MIDI. Of course, you can change everything. Even though you've been given a file, it's easily manipulated. Now, in order to send a MIDI file, in order to make sure that it opens up on somebody else's computer, my first task is to take this particular variation. That's a 12-bar blues. You can see lots of different variations. I've done some swing ones, done some straight ones, some major ones, some minor ones, all of that. Basically just to make it easier for the end user without having to do a lot of editing. My first task is to drag it to the beginning of the recording here, to bar 1. If I was to export a MIDI file at bar 545, that is where it's going to appear on somebody else's workstation, and they look at the screen and go, where is it? I can't see it. And they try to import it again, only to realise that it is in fact right at the end. We don't want that. So everything that I've exported is from bar 1, beat 1. So if you open up a new file, it'll just appear. The next thing to worry about is how you're going to make this appear on somebody else's computer with the correct instruments, or vaguely the correct instruments. You don't want all pianos or all this. And actually for GarageBand for iOS, this is really important. The piano at the moment, as you can see here, is assigned to MIDI channel 1. Now, if you look online, a list of general MIDI sounds, there are 128 of them, and they're grouped into 16 separate categories. Those 16 categories also line up with your MIDI channels 1 to 16. So piano is channel 1, bass is channel 3. Drums have always, since the dawn of time, been on channel 10 for reasons unknown. But we've got drums here on channel 10, bass on channel 3. Now, if I get all of these three things together, I'm going to be basically making a single MIDI file, but it splits the other end into the three instruments. So it's a type 1 MIDI file. Type 0 is if you want everything to appear in one file, which may be useful, for example, if you're recording piano with right hand first and left hand separately, or you're doing lots of different drum sounds and you want to make that into a flat file. That's a category 0, or the type 0 MIDI file. But this is a type 1. So I'm going to go to Functions, MIDI region parameters. Apply all parameters permanently. That means that it's not going to do any of this sort of silly nonsense. This is basically not an exact science. It may open up on somebody's machine fine, and then somebody else's machine with a different workstation or a different program, and it might just not quite open correctly. Now that's always going to happen because there's so many different things, different standards and different methods of doing things. Anyway, I'm going to export this now. Just go to File, Export, Selection as MIDI file. So just that selection, there's those three boxes. And I'm going to call it Blues in G Test for iOS, because I'm going to send it to my iPad and you can see that it'll open up. So I'll save that. While I'm still on this computer screen, in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this in GarageBand on the desktop here to verify that it works. And there it is. There's your three files. We've got piano, drums, and bass. Now, this may happen with bass instruments. Indeed, this does happen. I've seen this quite a few times online where it'll put the bass up an octave. It's far too high. That's okay. We just go here and transpose everything down an octave. And there it is. I didn't really have to do much. It was in the same key, same tempo. It picked the bass sound. It was just an octave too high. But that's fine, that works. So I'll just quit GarageBand now. Now I'm going to show you on iOS, and I'm going to talk about why it's important to get these drum sounds right. Open with Files. On my iPad, GarageBand Files, Transfer, I'll just add it to GarageBand. Now I'm going to go into GarageBand itself, create a new document, and I'm going to create an audio recorder track first. You have to do this to kind of initialize the page. And just go to the brick wall symbol, and there it's showing my page, and it's also showing the little number 1 above the loops. Now, I've got my files. If I just go to Blues in G test for iOS, there we go. And it now appears in my list. I can then drag this onto my screen, and lo and behold, you can see that it's done pretty much the same as it did with desktop GarageBand. If I just play this back. Now, for some reason, it has decided to play it at a slower tempo. So this is how it's not an exact science. 56 beats per minute. I don't know where it got that from, but I'll just speed it up to whatever tempo I want. Again, this is a fairly trivial exercise. It's a little swipe and we're back up to tempo. Here we go. Now, the bass is also up an octave. Now, it is resist the temptation to transpose the bass down an octave on the original, because it's far too low and it will open up on somebody else's Logic far too low, and you might not even hear it if you've got a small set of speakers, and you might blow them because the bass is so low, all that. So, there we go. Now, I need to also bring it up 2 semitones because I accidentally dragged it down wrong. And there we go. So I had a little bit of a fiddle with the bass there and it didn't quite work, but I've got it working in about 10 seconds. And there's my MIDI track. Now, this is really important when you're exporting a MIDI file that you want to open up in somebody's iOS. The drums on iOS GarageBand, if you import a standard MIDI file and nothing is assigned to that channel, that magic channel 10, it's not going to open. Instead, it'll just open a piano sound, and you can't drag that then onto a drum track because it'll say only types of drums can be dragged here, or whatever the phrase it uses. So you've got to make sure that when you are exporting for iOS, those drums have to be on channel 10. It's absolutely essential. And then you'll get your file neatly on iOS as well.